This is The Baseline, discussing the hot button topics of the NBA. Welcome, everybody. You are tuned to The Baseline. Callie, Warren, Shaw, discussing the hot button topics of the NBA. We are back. And, man, now is as good a time as any with so much that has happened post-NBA Finals. A little bit of a hiatus, but let it not be said that the NBA, and Shaw and I, we always keep saying this, the NBA is the gift that just continues to keep on giving. And so, obviously, we have now entered into free agency season, or as most people will call it, free agency frenzy. And so much has happened in the last week, and it would just be crazy if it was just only myself and my brother from another mother to kind of discuss what's been going on. We obviously want to make sure that we are the gift that keeps on giving. And so we have a special guest along with us in this episode of The Baseline to help us break down the frenziness that has taken place with free agency and the moves that have been made. He is a capologist, a specialist that really fine-tunes and looks in everything going on, not just with the NBA in general, but also with the NBA salary cap and the collective bargaining agreement. You can catch him with the special show that he always does with capsheets.com. The show is called Third Apron. And our special guest joining us to help us discuss everything going on is our man, Yossi Gozlan. Yossi, thanks for hopping on board with us this week. And my man, Sean, thanks for hopping on board as we get right into the craziness that is the NBA free agency season.
Well, Yossi, we're going to roll the red carpet out to you, brother. It's a pleasure to have you here with us. Our first time getting to interact with you on The Baseline, but following your work for a very long time, since the Hoops Hype situation, man, and glad to see that you're on your own platform doing your thing, and really excited about the conversation we're going to have here today with my guy.
No, thanks for having me on. I'm really excited to do this. Thank you.
Okay, Yossi, we're going to let you lead off for us here, and I'm going to throw out the question to you first so that we can spark this. What was your overall thought process about, or at least what your expectations were going into NBA free agency? Was there something that you were really leaning towards looking at, given the circumstances of what happened with the NBA Finals, with the Oklahoma City Thunder winning the title, minus all of, the hoopla that's been given by most of the mainstream media talks? What was your expectations going into the into free agency?
I was expecting a pretty slow free agency, mainly because this is one of the more weaker classes. It's mostly role players. I think, surprisingly, the best player to change teams is Myles Turner through free agency, but nobody saw that coming. But then for the most part, it's, high-end role players like Nickeil Alexander-Walker, Ty Jerome, and everything kind of ended pretty quickly. I think June 30th, July 1st, everything got done, and we kind of had it's been pretty quiet the past few days. Like, it's pretty rare for July 4th, July 5th to have virtually no move. So I kind of expected that it'd be done pretty quickly. Also, there just isn't a lot of money. No, there's only one team with cap space which is the Nets, and they're not even really using it to sign players to compete. They're using it to get more draft picks and contracts that other teams don't want. So as far as Oklahoma City, I'm not sure if that's really affecting how teams are building, because they're in just this rare situation where they have a deep, young core that just won the championship. They didn't even pay the tax, and they have all these draft picks to sustain this at least through the end of the decade, I think. No other team is close to that situation. So now, we're just seeing teams particularly in the East, try to get as much talent as they can, because the biggest thing that happened in the playoffs with all these Achilles injuries. So the East is more wide open than it's maybe even ever been, and that's kind of crazy to say. If for us following the NBA for several decades now, this might be the most wide open it's ever been, and just getting a couple extra good players in might make all the difference.
Yeah, what I've noticed is, again, nobody is taking the East off, if you will. No one's afraid of Indiana. Obviously, no reason to be with Halliburton kind of going down. And when you talk about the calendar kind of shifting, well, the action is kind of done. I think a lot of that is based on how the league has reset its rules as well, too. you can negotiate with your free agents, kind of in advance. I mean, we knew that was happening anyway, but now they made it illegal, so to speak. And then even, people doing business even through the NBA finals. And then 3 days after this NBA draft, and 3 days after that, it was free agency. So I think things have been a little bit more condensed. And I think we saw a lot of action in terms of, as you alluded to, you'll see kind of in the middling aspect, or like role players, so to speak, but also teams that took some really big swings as a result of the way that the NBA has trended specifically. And, I think Boston having to get off of that second apron and all those extra dollars, you got guys like you, Bobby Marks, out there saying that they would have had almost a $600 million payroll in terms of taxes and fees, right? So they needed to get off of that, and that impacted the way teams were able to make moves, especially kind of picking off of Boston's, not even scraps, but some of their key rotation guys. And then I think other things in terms of the draft, the New York Knicks finally making a decision, but they're trying to improve their bench as well too. I think it's been an interesting, although maybe not super, I don't want to say super scintillating free agency, but I think there's been things that have been really interesting as a result of the way the NBA currently now functions. What are your thoughts?
Well, I'll say it was more exciting, like, I guess, the end of June. Like, you had the Desmond Bane trade, and then right before the draft, there was like the flurry of all those trades, like the Boston trades, Holiday, Porzingis, Jordan Poole. I might be missing some. That was an expectation from a lot of people around the league because so many teams are pretty leveraged and have pretty high payrolls, and they need to move money around. So that stuff got done pretty early. And especially for Boston, like you mentioned, they were going to have their luxury tax penalty was going to be bigger than their payroll. And maybe if they advanced further and if Tatum didn't get hurt, they might consider not paying quite that much, but maybe still spending a lot of money on this and keeping most of the group together. After that, now it just doesn't make sense to spend all that money and be above the second apron and deal with all those restrictions. So it's better to get off these guys earlier while you can, while they're still, while they're still like a little younger, while teams are still interested in them, save more money. And so it just made sense for Boston. Now that we're starting to see a new type of trend, the Bucks, to get Myles Turner, they needed to clear a lot of cap space. And to do that, they decided to waive and stretch Lillard, who's going to now leave a $22.5 million cap hit over the next 5 years. We've never seen a player have that much stretch money as a percentage of the cap ever. And we've never seen a team push the limits of how much they can waive a stretch a player. Because you can only do up to 15% of the cap, and that's basically 15%. And it seems like the Suns might end up doing the same thing with Bradley Beal. There's some speculation that might happen, some reporting that maybe the Suns go that route as well. So now we've seen teams in the past 5-6 years give out a lot of big contracts to players that might not be quite worth all that, and just trading all the draft picks they can to maximize the present. What happens to some of these teams once you kind of hit a wall after doing all that stuff? You have no moves left. Now we're starting to see teams use the wave and stretch, and you get to extend you get a little bit more time. You get some instant savings that could give you a little more flexibility to remain as relevant as possible. But we don't know. This is pretty risky for 3-4 years from now. The cap's not expected to go up like it was. This could really hurt these teams in the future. So that's the most interesting thing, is seeing teams stretch literally the limits of the stretch provision. I'm very curious to see how this looks 3-4 years from now.
Yossi Gozlan joining us here from Third Apron on the baseline. I want to touch on that a little bit more, Yossi, with regards to this methodology, right? This logic. Is it because there probably isn't that much more? There isn't more that can be done given the circumstances and the way that things have been structured regarding the apron, or is this again, the analytic guys, the guys, the guys behind crunching these numbers that are helping to kind of usher in or make us buy into the idea that this is the way that we're going to wind up going because of it. Like it's a calculated play to have happen. And then I guess my follow-up question to that is Myles Turner the best test case for this situation to actually go down? Because of many people, listen, I've always enjoyed Myles Turner and his game and what he is. But the other underlying theme is about whether or not what you're doing as the Milwaukee Bucks is you're facilitating a team that's going to be able to keep Giannis there and is going to compete. Does Myles Turner move that needle to exercise this kind of strategy in doing so? And not to minimize anything of what Damian Lillard didn't give you, but I'm just saying, is that the guy you want to be doing that for?
So to your first part, I think the CBA did kind of expedite things a little bit, because in the previous CBA, you can spend as much money as you want, be very deep into the tax, but you could still use like the mini mid-level exception. You could still do trades where you take in a little bit more money than the player you're sending out. Now, those restrictions make it a lot harder for like basically the Bucks and Suns couldn't do any moves like that. Like they were stuck between just re-signing their own players, signing minimum players and their draft picks, and then I suppose trading a more expensive player for cheaper players. But I think for the most part, this has been more self-inflicting for these teams, where over the past since 2020, the Bucks have traded almost every single draft pick, every swap they can to bring in Drew Holiday, to then in the future trade Holiday and more picks and swaps for Lillard, and they did other trades involving picks down the line. And they really don't have any more moves to make. They only have like one tradable first. You got to be really careful with that. Whatever trade you make, it's got to make sense. Like I understood at the time trading what they had left to get Lillard didn't work out, but you still understand the taking that risk at the time. And then with the Suns, they went from having Chris Paul, Aiden, Mikal Bridges, all their draft picks. They didn't have a single outgoing draft pick right before the 2023 trade deadline to like within 6 months, trading it all for Durant, Beal, Nurkic, Grayson Allen, having no draft picks left. So it's more so the decisions, I think, that put him in this position where they have nothing left. The Suns, after trading Kevin Durant, they got a bunch of second round picks, but then they like parlayed a bunch of those to bring in the 31st pick, Fleming, some more, trading for Kobe Brea. There are other second round picks that they already don't have any moves to make. They can't trade. They don't have any more picks to trade Bradley Beal. So now they're at the point where this is their only way to save money if they end up doing that, waiving and stretching Bradley Beal. So I think it's more so what they've done to put themselves in this position. The only other team I could see kind of approaching this are the Sixers, because they have Embiid, whose health is in serious question. Paul George is 35. What if one of those players just don't work out? They might have to end up consider doing something quite like this for one of those players. As to your point about Myles Turner, I don't think that this is the player worth doing this for, having these, $22 million to pay Damian Lillard not to play for the next 5 years. To be honest, I don't think there really is anybody worth doing that for, because it just seems like that could be something that really obstructs the Bucks' future down the line. Like, you never know what opportunities they now might not be able to complete because of this money that they have obstructing their cap sheet. I like Myles Turner. He's a great player. He was really invaluable for the Pacers, helping them get to the finals. I think that contract is still pretty low. I can't believe the Pacers didn't match that. He's going to be making less than guys like Pirtle, Jared Allen. I think he's better than a lot of other starting centers that are going to be making more than him. But for the most part, the Bucks, they got their Brook Lopez replacement, a younger version of Lopez. So yeah, to answer that, I wouldn't have done this for him. And even if it brought in another top 10 player, I'm not sure I would have done this. I understand you can't really just trade Giannis unless he explicitly asks for a trade. And this is basically like as good as you reasonably can do without, like, they still leverage themselves more with this stretch, but at least they didn't trade any draft assets. They technically got Turner for free, so to speak. But I wouldn't have done this for Turner.
So before we switch segments, and take a quick break here, I think if you're the cap guy for any one of these teams, and I think you've already answered the question kind of through the answer, but would you advise this kind of as a last ditch strategy? Because it kind of reeks of desperation, honestly, I think, from Milwaukee, and they've done everything they possibly can to try to appease Giannis in his tenure as a Milwaukee Buck. But now you're talking maybe maybe Phoenix looks at this as a Bradley Beal option because, well, the Bucks did it, so maybe we can do something like this, especially since he has a no trade clause. And then the 76ers, whether or not Embiid is long for this NBA career based on his injury status and or Paul George wanting to be a Sixer, those are three teams, I think, with very, very, very interesting situations that could be assessed. I think when Ben Simmons was in this situation previously, they're like, no, we're just not going to do it. We're not going to pay him to not be on our team. But now they did it with a guy like Damian Lillard, who's going to be a first ballot Hall of Famer. Just, can you see any scenario where you ever advise this if you were the capologist for any NBA team?
No, probably not. I'd probably be like, hey, here's why here are all the reasons we shouldn't do that, and that's that, and then they'll decide what they want to do after that.
Hopefully they'd keep you around, giving them that safety advice. But sometimes we know these governors, they get a little excited, brother. But
keep getting that same look that you just gave when you said that, Yossi. Let's just give them that same look. You're tuned to the Baseline. Callie Ward Shaw discussing the hot button topics of the NBA, and our special guest, Yossi Gozlan from Third Apron, joining us here as we get into all of the things that have been happening with the NBA free agency and NBA offseason. Coming up, we'll talk about a couple of the trending topics. We'll look into the winners and losers of the NBA free agency frenzy that's been going on. And then we'll also dig into some of the news and notes that have been taking place as well, too, specifically a big hire in the Big Apple. Don't go anywhere. Baseline coming right back at you. We're back. Callie Warren Shaw, Baseline NBA podcast, and with us, special guest Yossi Gozlan from Third Apron. He has a weekly show that laser focus on the salary cap and CBA. It's a weekly show that you can find on all the major platforms, so be sure to check it out. So let's get right into it. Winners and losers of the NBA free agency segment of the season, right? By all accounts, Yossi, listen, I think a lot of people have been looking at, teams that really kind of either exceeded, achieved, or overachieved this last season. And I think they all read the writing on the wall. If there's ever a time for them to kind of make moves and push their chips in to the table to make something happen, to make a legit run for the 25-26 season, this would probably be where it's at. So, one of the teams that obviously stand out, the Atlanta Hawks, right? I think, aside from picking the litter of some of one of Boston's key players that helped them win their championship, I think getting a role player like Capela, Alexander Walker, Luke Kennard, Asa Newell, like, to me, this is like, okay, we probably was trying to understand what the look of this Hawks team is going to be, especially still with Trae Young, but hopefully now getting back Jalen Johnson healthy, Dyson Daniels. What do you make of the moves that the Atlanta Hawks have made? Do you consider them winners for these transactions that they were able to achieve so far in free agency?
Yeah, I consider the Hawks one of the more improved situations where right before they did the DeJounte Murray for Dyson Daniels trade, like, things were just not looking good for them. Like, that trade was just like, the fit with Trae Young was not looking great. They owed some upcoming picks to the Spurs, and then they just completely turned it around by trading for Dyson Daniels, who was just the perfect fit with Trae, exactly what they wanted in DeJounte originally. And to they solidify their core with the selection of Zachary Ricochet, and then Jalen Johnson just kept improving. that was huge for them to establish their core and then to bring in Porzingis to solidify it. I think like number one, yeah, they have a lineup that a closing lineup that should be strong enough to potentially, beat one of the contenders in the East if everything breaks right for them. But then they just needed a bench, and they had a lot of money to spend. They had a lot of tax space to bring in one of the arguably the best wing available, with Nickeil Alexander-Walker, who can also close. I'm sure he'll be closing over Risache at times. They bring in Kennard. So they have two guys. They didn't really fully address point guard, but like between Trae Young, who's going to play like 35 minutes tonight, and then Kennard and Alexander Walker, they both players can pass the ball, handle it enough where they have enough of like a semblance of a point guard rotation. I like that Okongwu is going to be coming off the bench. It's one of the better backup bigs in the league. Yeah, absolutely. They're one of the biggest winners. And also they went ahead and now they might have a top 4 pick in next year's draft by moving down 10 spots in this year's draft with the Pelicans. We'll see how the Bucks do, but it's most likely going to be the Pelicans pick. There is a swap involving the Bucks. I would guess if Giannis sticks around, the Bucks should probably be competitive enough where maybe they get into the playoffs. But I don't see the Pelicans being even really better than the play-in conversation in the loaded Western Conference. So not only do they have their team set up, but they might have the opportunity to select yet another cornerstone, or maybe use that pick to make another big trade down the line for the next available All-Star. So yeah, their outlook for this season is spectacular, but also starting next season as well with this pick.
Yossi, I want to piggyback off the Atlanta conversation because they are one of my favorite teams in terms of improvement, right? If you pick the bar from where they were last year to who they probably should be this upcoming year, there should be a massive leap. But is this a case where they were better lucky than good? Because I think if Joe D calls you and says, hey, I want to jump up and give you my next year's pick that could be potentially top 5, I don't know how much of that is great GMing in terms of being able to negotiate that. Apparently that was offered to them and they couldn't believe it. It was a kind of a Godfather offer. It's the deal they couldn't refuse. And then Boston being in the situation they are with Porzingis is all right, well, all that costs them is Niang and, Terrence Mann and a couple of other machinations with Brooklyn. But your thoughts are just kind of the competency level in Atlanta. Were they lucky or were they good?
Obviously there is probably with all things involved, there is some luck. I don't think they expected Dyson Daniels to be quite this good. One of the runner-ups for Defensive Player of the Year, one of the best stealers, if that makes sense, in the league, perimeter defenders. So they made the right decisions, and I suppose how they've paid off with some of the higher end outcomes has been great. As far as getting that pick, there's a lot of speculation out there what exactly happened. One of their assistant GMs, Bryson Graham, was just with the Pelicans. Maybe there was something there with the relationship that helped the Hawks get the advantage, because one of the bigger questions I've seen people ask is, well, why did the Hawks get to make this trade instead of some of the other teams above them? That's a really interesting question. So that may have factored into them, I suppose, getting lucky and this happening. There was a report by Shamadua that the Pelicans just straight up offered this. This wasn't anything that maybe they had some inside info on who the Pelicans wanted. They just, it seems like there is some luck involved there as well as far as how that went down. So, goodbye to the Hawks. They bring in, they've been in a good position ahead of negotiations with whoever they've got in working for them, I suppose, where they just were prepared to execute these deals.
Let's pivot ourselves to to a team that, by all accounts, I think had one of the great turnaround seasons we've had in the last few years with the Houston Rockets. I don't think anybody can question, the coaching acumen of Ime Udoka and what he's able to extrapolate from any roster that's given to him. That being said, they pushed their chips all in. They managed to get Kevin Durant. The signing of Dorian Finney-Smith, a lot of people are talking about. They also get Clint Capela. And then, and then extending or re-signing, Jabari Smith Jr., extending Fred VanVleet. So what do we make about what we're seeing here, from the Houston Rockets? And Shaw, I'll let you jump in on this part of it first, because I know you want to probably lean in a little bit more to get more insight, from Yossi's perspective. But what are we saying here about the Houston Rockets? Is this enough? And is everything leaning on that idea that, they pretty much have the inside track to probably upend the Oklahoma City Thunder or be one of the best teams in the Western Conference because of what they've done?
Well, on paper, it looks great, right? And I think what we need to pause, and I think you'd appreciate this, Cal, is Kevin Durant teams, when he's traded to them, outside of Golden State, like they've all various degrees of success and maybe no success at all. So I think on paper it makes the most amount of sense. He and Udoka's relationship seems to be good. It gives them a true adult and Hall of Fame closer to be in there, replacing Jalen Green and even Dylan Brooks to a lesser degree. Getting Dorian Finney-Smith, Clint Capela as well to this, re-signing Jabari Smith, as you alluded to. Like, all these things make sense on paper, and they should be able to play in a variety of different ways. I think it's just a matter of always the health, right? Making sure everybody is available to play. And then I'm a little concerned, just a slight edge of concern about Şengün. And what is he thinking about his role, definement here now, with KD kind of coming into the fold? I'm not saying he's going to be a problem, and I don't think there's any reports out there that he'd be unhappy with getting a Hall of Fame on the roster. But there is something that's just like, all right, things are going to change a little bit, especially when you talk about a men needing to take another step up as well, too, into the rotation. Reed Shepherd or whatever, they just got rid of Cam Whitmore. But those are the things that I'm concerned about. Yossi, from your lens, again, good GMing by Raphael Stone and company here, and any thought or any feedback into maybe some of my concerns, not concerns, but my eyebrow raise of maybe Şengün's role placement with Kevin Durant coming into town.
I would suspect they probably would have preferred maybe there's if a different star became available, like if Booker or Giannis, but obviously, you can't really pick and choose who you can get every time. So they got the best player available to them who wanted to be there. And I think, a very low price. Like, I think the most valuable aspect of the package was the 10th pick. And even though I think their offense should probably significantly improve by going from Jalen Green to Kevin Durant, and they lost Dylan Brooks, but then they went ahead and signed Dorian Finney-Smith to replace him. So they still have that high level of perimeter defense. So credit to the management for negotiating everything. They still have those two extra Suns picks in the future, so they still have another big move to make. Credit to ownership for getting into the tax already. It's not going to be that big of a tax penalty, but still, like, they don't have to pay the tax. Maybe they get out of it later with some trade, but the commitment to just be willing to spend as much as possible to have this team that's just so loaded from even like their third stringers can be in rotations for most teams. Like Clint Capela is your third string big man. That's just great. As far as your concerns, I do have some skepticism on how exactly this is all going to work. Like, they should have a top 3 or 4 defense at least. They've been having a below average half court offense. Can you get that to average? I'm not too sure how much better it's going to be. I do think that, they are very big. That's the strategy. And because if you're going to try to compete right now, that means you're going at OKC. You need to have a very big physical team to match them. And in theory, you could make the case that they have a shot, but I am concerned about the lack of shooting they have. I think a lot of that also depends on Jabari Smith. They went ahead and extended him to a contract that if he can be impactful, then it should look like a good contract. But he still hasn't really been that impactful. He got demoted to the bench last year, so a lot's going to be expected from him. he needs to be, I think, like the third or like at minimum fourth best player on the team this year for that contract to make sense. It's like good third or fourth option money. So if he can hit that and really find the role, and hopefully playing with Kevin Durant will help them, then I do think there's a good chance their offense can reach the levels needed to truly be a contender and potentially even knock out OKC. So that's what I'm looking at the most. He's really like the X factor in my eyes. Can he be the third or fourth best player on this team? That's going to be really important.
I'm glad somebody spoke to it. I mean, that to me, of all those things that the Rockets did, and I know that we're gonna have a point in this in this show where we're gonna be like questioning teams and what they're doing. I think part of me wanted to ask that question about the Houston Rockets, because to me, it looks like this team is structured to play a more half-court oriented offense. And you have that kind of athleticism with Amin Thompson. You know, what are we saying? You want him to be a half-court type player? You know, this is a guy that I think wants to get up and down the court. I think you probably had more balance last year, even with an inconsistent Jalen Green. But with the guys that you currently have, expect the pace to not be clearly as fast, and expect it to be about more execution and efficiency, which I don't have a problem with. But I think it lends to what you were saying, Shaw, about what we might expect to see from Alfred Sengun and his offense. You know, does it go through him and then back out, or does it start with them and then he becomes like a second, third option? So that means he's going to have to be impactful in other ways based on how that offense has been set up. And it's not even me questioning it being around Kevin Durant, because remember, you still have Fred VanVleet. You got other guys that are, you know, essentially they thrive because they played better half-court style offenses, but they were never good in the open court. So now it's all being confined. So it'll be interesting to see, you know, what takes place. Let's shift focus now to another team, one that was on the precipice of probably trying to knock off the champions in the Denver Nuggets. And just when you probably started wondering whether or not the Nuggets were going to move on from Michael Porter Jr., somebody's prayers were answered. And so part of the offseason for the Denver Nuggets was them acquiring Cam Johnson from the Brooklyn Nets. But in turn, they get the old flame back with Bruce Brown. They pick up Timmy Hardaway Jr., Jonas Valanciunas, picked up in a trade through the Sacramento Kings. Yossi, what are we talking about here with this Denver Nuggets team? It feels like a reload, like they're not calling it quits, that they really are going to try to see if they can make this happen. But is it enough, given what we've seen from the Rockets and obviously what we see from the Oklahoma City Thunder and the way that they were as successful as they were winning the championship?
So I think it's worth noting that while Michael Porter Jr. has not been great for the Nuggets in the playoffs over the past few years, including their finals run, he also was injured last year, he had a shoulder injury. If you're asking me, does going from Michael Porter Jr. to Cam Johnson is a huge, significant, improvement? I wouldn't think so. I think the bigger thing, I think Cam Johnson, yeah, no, like that. So the bigger thing with that trade is that they saved about like $18 million. They are below the aprons now. They're like right at the tax. Like now they have flexibility to do other stuff. So what they really did was just go from like paying the Porter Jr. type, $40 million a year to half that. And now that allowed them to then do the Valanciunas trade, which, that's still TBD, see what happens with his situation as of the time of this recording. Sounds like the Nuggets are still trying to convince him to stay. But they also got arguably the best veteran minimum signings with Bruce Brown, Tim Hardaway Jr. So I think as long as they're healthy and Jokic is still a top 2 player in the league, then they can beat Oklahoma City. But this is, I think, more so a kind of like a redistribution of the money, where they already had kind of like the Suns and the Bucks, they're very leveraged in draft picks. So they traded their last remaining tradable pick to do this, which could hurt them in the long run. But we're talking about 7 years from now. Jokic is an all-time great, very good chance he's still, a top 10-ish player by 2032. So that might not end up hurting them too much. But this is, again, with the savings, this also lets them comfortably extend Christian Brown and Peyton Watson. Because had they kept Porter Jr., just extending Christian Brown would have them like blow past the second apron for next year when that extension kicks in. Now they can reasonably keep him and Peyton Watson. So that's another thing involved. So it helps them extend their window. I wouldn't say they're significantly better, but they are going to be, I suppose, significantly better in the next few years because they can have a deeper team now.
I'm going to say to Shaw before you jump in, I will say, though, using the word significant, I think could be one that's up in the air. But I do think that the Denver Nuggets are definitely a better team because I think I've never seen a team struggle so much to try to get out the most from a player who I just think that just wasn't his place. Like, I just don't think that he actually fit. He rode off of the success, of them winning that championship, but you can clearly see that he never found his identity as a Denver Nugget. And I say this a lot, like, some players are just naturally great and they can thrive anywhere that they go. But some players, you need to give them a reset. And the organization needs a reset from that because the more they continue to keep making moves and doing things around this idea that they're trying to get what they can from the player, the more that the struggle becomes. And then to your point, we have these type of shows where we're trying to figure out what is the actual end game after the move is being made. So if it gets them in a place where they can financially be able to at least do something over the next couple of years, I think they're the better for it because a guy like Cam Johnson, they can mold better if they choose to keep him. And then they don't have to choose to keep him, but they don't have to continue to struggle with what they've been struggling with Michael Porter Jr. Doesn't mean that he can't be a great player. He can reset the button and be great with the Brooklyn Nets. Everyone has an opportunity to look good in Brooklyn. But for me, I like the idea that the Denver Nuggets finally said, we've got to do something here because we can't keep running it back with him, Murray, and Jokic because it just doesn't seem to click when it matters the most for them since they won that championship.
Well, yeah, Seattle will never miss an opportunity to throw dirt on Michael Porter Jr.'s name. So,
see, don't you going to the extreme? You're thinking I'm throwing dirt on him. I'm not.
Well, I think it's interesting because I think I'm in agreement with both of you. So I don't think Cam Johnson is like the miraculous lauding move that everyone was praising it for. Like, we got off of Michael Porter Jr., we got Cam Johnson. Like, Cam Johnson's cool. You know what I mean? He's gonna play a little bit more defense for sure. But I mean, it's just not that. But I think it's the other moves, and I think as Yossi alluded to, it's these moves that allow them to make future moves with certain guys who they ultimately do want to keep. So that's what it really comes down to when you're trying to general manage a roster and a team. And with their general manager president coming out in the days before our free agency opening and talking about even tidbits of like, well, we don't want to end up having to lose Jokic. Like, I think they needed to figure out what are the moves that would potentially make him happy. Bruce Brown Jr. slots in as maybe a Westbrook light. He'll do some secondary playmaking, if you will, but also has the good vibes of Jokic and Jamal Murray being on the team previously. Tim Hardaway Jr. coming in to, quote, space the floor. Again, the idea of Hardaway Jr. probably better than the reality, but, you get what you're going on there. The biggest thing to watch here, though, I think is what's going on with Valanciunas. Reports are that he may ultimately want to go to Europe. I think right now he's going to have to honor the trade, but then maybe work with Denver on whatever that situation may ultimately turn out to be. Not sure, Yossi, just real quick on that. Have you heard any updates on Valanciunas and his actual reporting to Denver versus going to overseas?
I haven't heard anything. I'm just following. Mark Stein is all over it. He's been tracking where they are, and that it just seems like it's up to Denver. Like they don't have to release him. They don't have to let him do this.
Right.
So we'll see. I figure we should know for sure within the next few days what happens.
Okay. See, I'm going to transfer us back over to the Eastern Conference, and one more team that has been deemed by many people to be a winner is the Orlando Magic. We touched a little bit on the Desmond Bane aspect coming in here kind of before the draft and all those other situations. But they also get Tyus Jones, a much needed backup to this while they lose KCP and Cole Anthony. Got a couple picks into the situation. Resign Mo Wagner as well too. Really, really, really a friendly deal. I think $5 million. I mean, that's like nothing for what he'd actually be able to provide for them going into this. Your thoughts, Yossi, on Orlando's moves? Do you deem them a winner of this offseason thus far?
I'm a little lower on what they've done. We all knew the Magic were going to do something to bring in some more scoring, some more shooting, some more playmaking, and they did it. They technically did it, and they did it in one of the more like aggressive, unexpected ways by bringing in Desmond Bane, who at his salary, along with Franz making his max money, Paolo expected to get a max contract, and Jalen Suggs also getting. He has a significant contract as well. They're committing to pay a lot of money for this team. Like, they believe in this group. They think that this is going to be a true title contender in the East. And I still want to see it first. I'm definitely, like, out of all the teams we've discussed, I'm the least confident in them because they still want to. They're still attached to the theory of that everyone needs to be big across the positions. And I think it requires a lot from Jalen Suggs. He needs to stay healthy. Thankfully, they have Tyus Jones, who during his peak days in Memphis, he would literally single-handedly keep the Grizzlies like in home court advantage range, while Ja Morant missed a ton of games with injuries or whatever it was. And Desmond Bane can also do some secondary creation passing. So this doesn't like transform the way they're going to play, I think. And then they also added Jace Richardson, who by all accounts is a good shooter. So it's like they really went ahead and addressed these needs, even if they kind of sacrificed a little bit of like size and length, so to speak. So I just need to see it first. I do have some doubts about how good the offense can get. I like kind of like our doubts with Houston. I wonder if this can really be like an above average half court offensive team. So I just need to wait and see, but I do respect the commitment, the aggressiveness by the Magic to go ahead and get Bane and commit to paying a lot of money for one of the smaller ish market teams.
Yossi, real quick, the aspect of a team like this, we talk about it because like they bring in players, and sometimes it's just the players that are supposed to come in here and then make all the difference, right? But sometimes it is stuff on the sidelines. Memphis last year, they changed their entire, kind of coaching side alongside before they actually got rid of Taylor Jenkins to kind of improve their offense. So Jaren Jackson saw some benefits of that, while Ja Morant maybe not as much. He struggled with whatever that new offense is. But do you think Orlando is as much as they lean in on defense, can they do something maybe with the coaching decision, over the course of the summer that might be able to impact this offense in a way that's just not so focused on being size and defensive orientated?
I'm not too sure. I just need to. I guess we just need to see how they do it. I think health would be the biggest thing, but as far as what other decisions or schemes they could do, I don't know. That's not really my expertise. I guess we'll have to see.
Well, how do you feel about the Detroit Pistons? Do you think that they done more than what the Orlando Magic did? Like, are you more impressed with their moves, getting in, bringing in Karis LeVert, getting Duncan, Shaz Lanier? Where are you with maybe the Detroit Pistons, another team that, obviously surprised a lot of people last season, getting into the playoffs, and, clearly they're not going anywhere. There's nothing but upside for them, but obviously they needed to get better and they need to get a little bit deeper. You think they addressed that a lot better than the Orlando Magic did?
I think as far as Detroit, ideally they probably would have just brought back all their free agents like Schroeder and Malik Beasley, Hardaway, maybe giving them just slightly above minimum level contracts or whatever it is, because one of the things about the Pistons is feels like they're on the cusp of really being a contender as well, and they're a team that a lot of people speculate they could be making like a consolidation trade or a trade for an all-star in the near future. I think they need to play out the season a little bit, though, just to confirm that whatever they did last year, that it's for real. And then maybe around the trade deadline or next year, you make that type of move. I think them, but then like all the circumstances that happened, losing Schroeder, the Malik Beasley situation, they had to pivot to somewhere else. And I think getting Karis LeVert, Duncan Robinson, they're going to get a trade exception from sign and trading Dennis Schroeder. So they could potentially do something with that, get another player later. I think they recovered nicely considering, how things kind of just changed with their free agents, especially the Malik Beasley situation. I think that really threw a wrench in their plan. So I think they, for the most part, like they're kind of the same as far as these players that they had to come off the bench. I like that Duncan Robinson's contract apparently is not. I think it's partially guaranteed next year and then non-guaranteed the year after. So they still have a lot of future flexibility despite these moves. So so in a way they still kind of did what I expected. Just keep the bench as deep as you can, but also have these salaries with LeVert, with Robinson, have this trade exception for Schroeder where you can do stuff in the future later. I think that was the bigger priority, and I'm definitely keeping an eye on them. I wouldn't surprise me if they're the team that gets the next available All-Star. Maybe they end up leapfrogging Orlando, Atlanta, one of these teams that we've been discussing.
So let me chime in, and then if you could kick us to break here, talk about the middle teams or what they're doing. But with Detroit, I'm only concerned in terms of the continuity, right? I think you had such great vibes, regardless of what the Malik Beasley situation was, even Tim Hardaway Jr. being a veteran guy. And while I think, as you alluded to, Yossi, personnel, talent-wise, is very similar, I don't know what's going to be vibe-wise within the locker room for a team that very much relied on that and really rallied behind a really great and a healthy season from Cade Cunningham and Jalen Duren for the most parts as well, too. So that's something I think we also need to watch with them. What is the actual vibe check in the Detroit Pistons locker room with some of these new pieces? Although Duncan Robinson is a pretty high character guy from what I've seen in Miami, so I'm not really worried about it. But there's just something I think in essence to kind of pay attention to.
Yeah, they still have all their core young players. Like that hasn't changed at all. So I think it's more so right now about just that, but also seeing who do they want to be a part of a part of the future. Like for example, Jaden Ivey, he's going to be extension eligible, but also just missed a lot of time. I'm very curious to know how they feel about him and if that's who they think can be the co-star to Cade. So I do think like a lot of other teams would have seen what the type of result the Pistons had and just went ahead and make a really aggressive move for them to take the next step. I think the Pistons wisely are taking their time with this. They still have a lot of information to gather on who their guys are, what they project them to be, how they fit, and they should be well positioned in the future to do that type of move if needed.
You're tuned to The Baseline. Callie Warrenshaw discussing the hot button topics of the NBA with our special guest, Yossi Gozlan from Third Apron. Coming up, we got teams that got to help us make it make sense. We got our man Yossi who's going to probably help us try to bring some logic to some of the madness that's going on. And then we'll also get into the losers, teams that no matter how you slice it, they're just taking L's for the free agency. So you don't want to miss it here on The Baseline. We're back. Callie Warrenshaw, Baseline NBA podcast. And with us, Yossi Gozlan of Third Apron. Be sure to check out his show, Third Apron. It's available on all the major platforms. You can also catch him on X. Let's get right into the teams that, we just help us make it make sense, right? Like the moves that were made, they're definitely a part of the free agency frenzy. But when you really kind of strip it down to what it's supposed to mean, it's just got you shrugging your shoulders. And so, Shaw, I'm going to let you lean on it first, because there was obviously a couple of teams that, really were on your radar trying to follow with what they were trying to do, justification, so to speak. And we don't get to talk about this team too often. And usually when we do, it's it's always with, not a, how do you say? It's with anything positive denoted about what they do, because anything they do just doesn't smell like winning. It always smells like either escaping or losing. So we're going to talk about the Washington Wizards. And the Washington Wizards was in the mix, but from your perspective, was it for all the right reasons, or is this still another wait and see mode? Like, we're still trying to figure out, like, what exactly is it that the Washington Wizards are trying to do? They pick up Cam Whitmore. They get CJ McCollum. They get Kelly Olynyk via trade, moving Jordan Poole, Dylan Jones, Trey Johnson, Will Riley. So there's a lot of moves that were made, a lot of moves that were done in this very short period of time. But what does that add up to when we talk about the Wizards?
I think the Wizards are finally heading to a place of a certain level of competency, certain level. Like, they realize, hey, we need to be bad. And we were trying to pseudo-compete post-Bradley Beal. We thought Jordan Poole and Kyle Kuzma were going to be our dudes. They quickly realized that was very much a losing composition. Traded Kuzma to Milwaukee, in the middle of last season, then ultimately getting off Jordan Poole, who had a bounce back from his first year in Washington. He played better, but he's just not a lead guy. And as much as I think as maybe he wanted to be, I think he even realizes that now. He's not a lead dude. So Washington says, all right, let's reset the table here. Let's sort of really figure it out. I think the moves of getting CJ and Kelly Olynyk are not long-term situations. They already still have Chris Middleton and Marcus Smart. All these are veteran guys who, air quote again, you would think maybe other teams would want going into the middle of the season. So I think they are positioning themselves up for the next move. They're not going to keep all these old veterans. I think they still had Malcolm Brogdon or the rights to him, if you will, and he may ultimately not resign there. So they have a lot of veteran guys, but now they're opening up stuff for young guys to play like Carrington. And obviously Sarr, getting Trey Johnson here as well too. And now, as we're just recording again, the Cam Whitmore situation. So they'll have a treasure trove, if you will, treasure trove of young guys who they can say, all right, who's really who can emerge from this situation while knowing they'll be bad, while knowing they should be within the top 5, but then potentially may be able to get late first round or, multiple second round picks from Olynyk, McCollum, Smart, and or Middleton as well too. Yossi, your thoughts on what Washington's doing here? Again, we know they're going to be bad, but is this competency that we're finally seeing from this Washington Wizards group?
Yeah, I think they've done all the right moves over the past few years since the new regime took over. Just, you got to get as much young talent as you can, take more flyers on guys like Cam Whitmore, Dylan Jones, get more second-round picks, first-round picks if you can. Keep developing players, see who can stick, be a part of the next great Wizards team. Yeah, I mean, I have no problem with what they're doing. I'm curious to see. Now, it is a very crowded backcourt, though. Even with the veterans, they haven't ever bought out anybody. Like when they've had Brogdon, they never bought him out. When they kept Tyus Jones past the trade deadline, they never bought him out. I would be curious to see what if one of like Marcus Smart, for example, said, "Hey, I would like to leave the team. Here's X amount of dollars so I can get back and go to sign with this team." Would the Wizards oblige? Because it is a very, very crowded backcourt now. There's going to be some young players that deserve time, might not get to play.
Let's move our attention to a couple other teams in the Eastern Conference, Yossi, because you mentioned buyout, right? Like possibilities. If it's a Marcus Smart, maybe CJ McCollum or in some regards, whatever the case may be, right? Let's look at the New York Knicks and the Philadelphia 76ers, two teams. Obviously with their own versions of controversies, the 76ers and what they did with their draft selection, not to say that there is, some great potential upside in having BJ Edgecombe, but now you're looking at a team where it's like, what is this roster really going to look like when everybody is absolutely healthy? Does it make sense? And then a New York Knicks team that was pretty much on the precipice of possibly getting into the NBA Finals. They fire their head coach. They turn around and arguably have one of the worst coaching searches. So they finally land on Mike Brown, albeit I'm sure Mike Brown is happy, but now we'll have a wait and see situation on whether or not this is going to get them back to where they are. And for all of everything, they wind up signing former Philadelphia 76er Gershon Yabusele. What do we make of both of these teams? Do the moves make sense for them? Did they address what needed to be addressed? Or by not addressing anything, did they address what needed to be addressed?
The Sixers are just kind of in a holding pattern with Quentin Grimes' free agency. I think they are trying to have as much flexibility as possible. in case that his contract gets a little higher than they anticipate. I also think they might be open to sign and trading him if a team offers like a first round pick to get him. I think they'd be open to that, especially considering they have a very crowded backcourt as well. So I think that's all that's going on. But again, it kind of comes back to all these other big contracts they have: Embiid, George, Maxey. You throw in Quentin Grimes as well, what he might get. This is why they're just patient and we're just waiting to see what they end up doing, and probably played into them letting Gershon Yabusele go. As for the Knicks, they capitalized on that. They got him on reportedly, like, it's the tax mid level, but he's reportedly taken even a little bit less than the full amount, because they have like some hard cap issues. So that's going to let them bring in another vet later. So I love the Knicks off season. I don't think they could have asked for a better fit, a better addition with that tax mid level. And they'll probably get another good veteran. And I'm kind of neutral on the Mike Brown hiring, but I think the Knicks they've done so many things right. They've batted like 95% on their decisions that I feel like they know what they're doing. And I'm going to let them, I'm not really going to, I have nothing really to say. I think we'll just have to see how it plays out. I think there's a good chance that it'll work out for them.
All right, let the Knicks cook. I like that, Yossi. A lot of Knicks fans will be happy to hear that. You'll be welcome in Madison Square Garden. Before we close out this segment here, let's talk a little bit about, the purple and gold. Are you happy with the Lakers offseason thus far? I've seen it both ways. I think fans are, but I've seen other analysts maybe not as excited, saying, well, we're not really sure what this team is trying to do. Always the LeBron drama, whether or not he's going to be there, wants to be there long-term, et cetera, to get DeAndre Ayton, after he gets bought out by the Portland Trailblazers. But your overall thoughts, is this Lakers team heading in the right direction, or are they kind of in the same position that they were last year?
I feel like they're worse. They've been trying really hard the past few years to recover some of the lost 3-and-D depth that they had in the 2020 title. They had Danny Green and Tavius Caldwell-Pope, Alex Caruso, and then they either traded them all or let them go in 2021 with the Westbrook trade and whatever other decisions they made. And they finally have some semblance of recreating that with their wing depth. And particularly Dorian Finney-Smith really, he turned their season around. Like right before the Luka trade, once they brought in Finney-Smith, they started really going with their upward trajectory. And whatever happened, I think it's a disaster that they lost him. And I'm not saying this as like to say that I think Dorian Finney-Smith is like the best 3-and-D player or anything like that. But the Lakers have limited assets. They have limited trade flexibility. Like, he kind of fell in their lap that they only had to give up 3 second-round picks to get him, and then they just lost him. I see they addressed center, getting Aiden at the rate they got him at. That's great value, but he's also not like a great rim protector by any means. I don't think this team could really stop anybody, and they lost one of their own. They lost their best defender, and I really don't. It's hard for me to envision them being above playing range right now. I'm a lot lower on their offseason than most.
Oh, I can't wait to bring you on, Yossi, at the preseason, man. We have to get you on here, man, to give your final assessment. We got a couple of our family members here in the 19 Media Group who might think differently, but that may be speaking optimism. You might have to give them a dose of reality about your assessment regarding the Los Angeles Lakers. Callie, Warren Shaw, Baseline NBA Podcast, and with us, our special guest, Yossi Gozlan from Third Apron. Coming up, we'll dig into the losers. Finally, we're going to put some L's on some teams. You don't want to miss it here on the Baseline. We're back. Callie, Warren Shaw, Baseline NBA Podcast, and our special guest, Yossi Gozlan from Third Apron. Be sure to check out his show, Third Apron. You can catch it on through capsheets.com, and you can also catch him on X at Yossi Gozlan. Yossi, man, we've been talking about the winners. We've been putting, teams on make it make sense for us. We've highlighted some of the, other things that are going on. Now we got to talk about what the hell was some of these teams doing, or like what was going through your mind type. Like, there's no way that you're winning in this situation. You can tell us it's champagne, but we know right now that's sparkling water. Okay. So I want you to kind of weigh in and give us who, did not win in the free agency, who has not won in the offseason thus far.
All right, so I think I've already alluded to, I don't like what the Bucks did. I don't like what the Suns did. I don't like what the Lakers did. I think the biggest loser might be the Pelicans. Just trading that pick, also trading the Pacers their own first round pick back to get a late first round pick in this year's draft. That seemed like at the time of the trade, the Pacers were about to play Game 6 of the finals. It seemed like, okay, I mean, the Pacers should be pretty good next year. But why do you want a late first round pick right now when you have the variance of next year's pick? You don't know what's going to happen next year. And lo and behold, a week later, Tyrese Halliburton tore his Achilles and Myles Turner left the Pacers. And I can't imagine right now. I have a hard time seeing the Pacers make the playoffs in the East. The Pelicans lost potentially 2 lottery picks by trading that one and their own pick in next year's draft. Yeah, that's the biggest thing. I don't really think trading CJ McCollum for Jordan Poole, they're very similar players. The biggest difference is Poole has more money owed. So you're just doubling down on that player type. I don't think they got better, and I think they've severely hurt their outlook with the way they've handled their draft picks. To me, I think they're the biggest losers of the offseason.
And to double down, still don't know what's going on with Zion Williamson and the proclivity for him to be there long term. I can't imagine a Jordan Poole, Zion Williamson, team co-pairings. Just doesn't seem all that sexy to me. So I will not throw any more dirt on their name. I agree with you. New Orleans has had a very, very perplexing and pretty fat offseason to date. I don't really know much about Mr. Fears. I'll be watching him very closely in Summer League, although that's not the litmus test, if you will, too, but just trying to see what they saw in him potentially as a kind of the cornerstone piece moving up to get him as highly as they did. The team I want to go to now, honestly, is 2 teams actually in the Eastern Conference, and very different sides of the coin here. Boston, we already kind of touched on based on their need to kind of get out of the tax and the aprons. And then Miami, who's been kind of conspicuous by not doing anything at all. It's been rumored, kicking the cans of maybe a Wiggins deal, to the Lakers. And if that floats your boat, getting back Rui and Dalton Connect, then sure. But I'm just overall perplexed by Miami's lack of movement. Unless they just feel like the internal development of Kel'el Ware is going to be that much more greater, that's going to propel them in some capacity. Kind of want to kick it to you, CL, then Yossi, you kind of jump in. Your thoughts on the Heat and Celtics, respectively, starting with Miami first and foremost.
Well, look, you would think that the Miami Heat would do something to, I think, really give us an indication about whether or not they want to buy into the opening that we've been talking about regarding the Eastern Conference. They're not a bad team, but they certainly have not elevated themselves to be a great team either. And if you're still looking at it from your core players that still have another level to go to, all right, I guess I get that. But I genuinely feel like the only way that that's going to happen is you got to find a way to bring in somebody, some way to kind of help shake those things up. So I think the stagnation of the Miami Heat to me is only concerning because how many more bites at the apple are you going to give Bam Adebayo, Tyler Hero to really help elevate and take this team to the next level? We just don't see enough glimpses of it. I understand that you tried doing it with Jimmy Butler, but I even said I kind of questioned the thing with Jimmy Butler, and Jimmy Butler proved more for Jimmy Butler's sake that he's that kind of player that he can make marginal teams be better. What you actually need is just a great player, because this is probably the best that you're going to get out of those 2 players from Hero and Adebayo. You need someone that's just going to be great and is just going to demand greatness at a level that they need to. But it's going to be hard pressed to see that now, given what's taking place. Because I think the next couple of years, even with free agency, who else is out there that's going to kind of help shake those things up? It's going to be a question of whether or not the Miami Heat can actually just put together a full, complete team. And it's hard to do that when you're not making any kind of play or any kind of moves in the offseason. There could have been some role players they could have added to this roster that I think could have helped them immensely, at least be competitive or challenge the guys that they already have on that roster. But they don't do that. And so, hey, if that's the culture way, if that's the Heat culture way, then this is going to be a wash.
Yossi, real quick, do you, piggybacking off Cal's point of Miami, do you think maybe they get lucky now in the Dame Lillard sweepstakes, as he becomes an unexpected free agent? And that's obviously this situation he ultimately wanted to go to. Again, they've been inactive, but do you think they can salvage their offseason if Dame Lillard decides to ultimately join Miami?
I would guess Lillard takes his time with this. There's no need for him to rush to any decision, even like for the offseason at all. I could see it. Either he could, for all we know, he might just end up signing with a team like really late into the season. I just think the Heat, the way the Butler trade went down, I don't think they were really prepared. I don't think they anticipated how things would get by not extending him, and I think that just kind of put them in this limbo they're at right now. But at the same time, they are well positioned to make a big move if they need to. They have a bunch of expiring contracts. They have some picks, but as we saw, they didn't want to get as aggressive for Kevin Durant, which so I'm not exactly sure what exactly they're prioritizing, because it seems like they're kind of trying to be as good as they can now, but they definitely have an eye for the future, which I think is important because this team isn't good enough right now. So they only have a couple first round picks to trade. If you are going to invest more in your future, I think you got to make sure it's the right move. But it seems like for the most part, they're trying to make some moves happen while giving up as minimal players and draft picks as possible.
I'll kick it back to you, USC, just to ask about the Boston. Do you consider them a loser? And maybe not by a loser of their own real doing, but more as a result of the business of the NBA. Just where do you place Boston in kind of these tiers of winners, losers, or kind of what are you doing?
I just think it's incomplete as far as how they traded Drew and Porzingis. I think it went about as I expected. I didn't think they'd have to give up any draft picks to get off either players. Instead, they got positive value for Drew Holiday, so I think that worked out well for them. So the bigger thing is, I suppose, how are you going to get this team back into contention by the time Tatum returns? That's the bigger challenge. I think it might require having to trade one of Brown or White, where if you can turn one of them, get like a Mikal Bridges type package, get like 3-4 first round picks, some good young players that fit the team, that might be your faster way back into contention versus just keeping what you have and trying to sign someone, trade for someone that might help you a little bit. So I think it's just very incomplete right now. I think they're still trying to do more moves. I feel like they're probably still trying to save some more money, maybe get under the tax, but can they capitalize, get a ton of value for one of their other all-stars? Seems like they're certainly listening to offers, but will they be able to get another team to pay whatever price it would be to trade one of them? I feel like if they can get a massive haul for one of those guys, then that would, in my mind, probably make them winners in my eyes.
Interesting.
Yeah, that might take some time. That could be a trade deadline type thing.
All right, Yossi, as we close things out here on the baseline, I want to thank you again so much for joining us and giving us your insight. A lot of great nuggets of information here too. Your knowledge of the salary cap, draft capital as well too, is something that not many people in our space really possess. So I want to thank you for that. As we close out though, any other teams, just kind of like quick hitters, you're still kind of wondering, like I'm obviously still wondering as we're recording and things can change by the time this comes out, what goals they ends up doing with Kuminga, or not. I think you'll do a Boston trying to get under the cap even more. Does the Sam Hauser end up somewhere? I think that's the contract that they ultimately move. What else are you watching, as we close out here and kind of what's now going to be the days between now and Summer League with free agency?
Just curious what else Indiana does to rebound from this, and if not, then are they going to potentially bottom out, really go all in on this gap year? Warriors make sense. I think they're trying to make sure if they do sign and trade Kuminga, that they get the right players that fit and helps with their cap sheet situation, but also maybe they re-sign him on a short-term deal. I don't think we could rule that out. And I think those are the two. And then I guess Brooklyn, just what else they do with their cap space. Is there another big trade out there that gets them another first-round pick?
Shaw, any final thoughts from your perspective? Like, what, where are you with what we have remaining for the summer? As far as possible moves that, you would probably like to see or like to hear more about. Any particular player specifically you'd like to hear more about, leading into, summer league and just in general?
Yeah, I mean, if I'm going to spitball a bunch of things here, right? So I kind of already touched on the Kuminga thing. I'm interested to see if Boston, what ends up happening with Al Horford release. I guess he shouldn't say he's a Celtic anymore, but does he end up signing with the Lakers, the Warriors, or in some other team, or does he just ultimately retire? I think that's a nice piece of this to kind of figure out. Is Phoenix really done? Would they ultimately then flip Jalen Green somewhere else potentially? I don't know. Those are some of the things that I'm really interested in seeing, that obviously as we get into summer league, just kind of watching what ends up happening. And the aforementioned Wizards, right? I think Yossi kind of said it best. There's too many veterans. There's too many of them. So do one of those guys get moved or bought out in the interim time to go be a nice rotation piece to maybe another contending team that Washington is quite not in that same position right now. So just a lot of intrigue for me, brother. You know what I mean? I love the NBA, and I'm always going to find a storyline or something for us to be able to talk about it on the baseline, man. So I think this has been a great, great positive and exciting show, at least for me, and hopefully our fans and listeners as well.
Absolutely. And before we head out, Yossi, kind of give our listeners a little bit, more into your show, and any upcoming episodes you got. I know you've been putting in some work with your man Sam Quinn, but any insight on any upcoming shows you got coming on, or where people can catch you?
As far as whatever show, just depends what happens. As soon as another big move happens in the next coming days or so, Sam and I will be ready to react on the Third Apron podcast. You can catch it on YouTube, wherever you get your podcasts. I also have the newsletter of the same name, where I get deeper into salary cap analysis. I highly recommend you guys you all subscribe to that, where I am going to really go deep on all the moves that happen, give my analysis. I'm working on something about the stretching, what the Bucks just did and what the Suns might end up doing with Beal, and just get into what that might mean for the league. And just as well, follow me on Twitter and Blue Sky at my name, Yossi Gozlan. I'm reacting to all the transactions with instant salary cap analysis, and then you could see all my information, all the salary cap information for each team on capsheets.com.
Absolutely, man. Yossi, we appreciate you hopping on board with us this week. My man Shaw, as always, man, great show, great opportunity for us to chop it up and be able to bring the one and only Yossi Gozlan on board to help us break all of the craziness down. And we definitely look forward to having you back on. For our listeners, you know how we roll, baby. It's summer league time, so definitely catch out more episodes of The Baseline. You know where to find us. Be sure to get my man Shaw at the Warren Shaw, or you can get at me at GameFaceLee, the show's Twitter handle, at NBA Baseline, or you can go to www.baselinenba.com. Also catch us on the YouTube channel, 19 Media Group. Go to www.19mediagroup.com. For The Baseline, Lee, Warren Shaw, we appreciate you guys. Thanks for hopping on board with us this week, and we'll catch up with you next time.